Alexander the Great Volkanovski. On the surface, his story is one of victory, triumph, and greatness.
Massive right hand floors the zombie.
But simmering beneath is a tale of heartbreak, setbacks, and struggle. I think the question that we all want to know the answer to is what leads a champion to his breaking point.
Like, it really is hard for athletes.
Well, it all started years ago. That is a 215-pound, 22-year-old Alexander Volkanovski, a professional rugby player.
You know, NFL, you got the blockers, right? Like, they're big. You know, I was pretty much playing that type of position where usually the guys are, you know, twice the size of me.
That's heavier than me.
I was just a ball.
It's not often that a story of a future legend of the sport of MMA starts at such a relatively old age and in such a wildly different discipline. But there were lessons to be learned in this brutal and gritty sport.
You think that rugby background like also influenced your desire to?
Yeah, for sure. That's what I mean by
Beat the
life
fuck out of
experience,
each
like through sport. You know what I mean? My brother just beating each other, all that.
It was on his off season, where Alex still needed to stay in shape, that he would decide to start doing some MMA training.
So I actually started MMA training as just to keep fit while I was playing rugby league.
Even though he'd only stepped onto the gym floors simply to stay in shape in pursuit of his rugby career, the fight game swallowed him whole. It turns out that he had had a yearning for controlled violence. Alex had previously dabbled in wrestling when he was a teen, just for a year, and even then he had managed to win a national title. I guess it should have been obvious to him then that he was well suited for a life in martial arts, but he had dropped his talents in wrestling to pursue rugby, something that he would do for the next 10 years. And whilst he was making a decent income as a league player in rugby and as a concreter for his family's business, he knew that off-season, falling in love with MMA, that he had to make a choice. And well, a year later we would see Volk take his first steps towards the cage as a professional. But there was one twist that even I didn't know until researching this video. He was making that walk as a goddamn welterweight. After 5 years in the sport, Alex had amassed an impressive record of 13-1, defined not only by his mixture of knockouts, submissions, and grueling decisions, but also his propensity to move in and out of weight classes. In his most recent fight, he had earned the Wollongong Lightweight Championship belt, placed next to his 7 other titles won across welterweight and featherweight respectively. Volk wasn't just winning, he was making statement after statement. The man simply wanted to brawl, no matter the circumstances. His winning streak showcased his natural inclination to athletic success. Whilst only dabbling in wrestling for a brief time as a teen, Volk had no real background to speak of in MMA. He just jumped in head first, feeling that call to violence. When I look back at Alex's career, I like to imagine how different he could have been as an MMA athlete if he had grown up in a dojo, a boxing gym, or even on the jiu-jitsu mats. It's hard to appreciate what kind of prowess could have been developed, considering just how naturally Volk had taken to the sport relatively late in his life. He was behind the curve, but if one thing was true, it was that he had certainly made up for lost time. It is no wonder this spectacular run through the regional scene in Australia caught the attention of the premier organisation. The UFC scouted Volk to join the company and to make his debut in his home country of Australia. He would be paired up against Yosuke Kasuya in a lightweight bout to take place at UFC Fight Night 101 in November of 2016. For perspective, this was just a month before Max Holloway would fight Anthony Pettis for the interim featherweight title. Volk had finally realised many men's lifelong dream of joining the UFC, but he had something more in mind for where his career would end up, something more befitting of his fighting name: greatness.
All right, let's jump into Volkanovski is minus 160 against Kasuya.
Kasayu. There's a lot of hype around Volkanovski here, Lou, with hardcore fans. 13-1. He's on a 10-fight win streak.
Done a name change at the last minute just before the big fight. It's going to be Alexander the Great. And the reason for this is you're probably thinking, what? For all the people that love the Hulk, it just obviously doesn't suit me. I'm a midget.
Australia, Alexander the Great Volkanovski.
Nice takedown there. I like how he's hovering over his opponent right now. He's so accurate with these shots, John.
So I remember just sitting there, so at the start I was like, he wasn't moving. So I was like, he's out. He wasn't out, he just couldn't move.
Alexander the Great Volkanovski.
It took Alex only 7 minutes to dominate his first opponent inside the 8-sided cage that makes up the UFC octagon. Alex had proven his worth in the finest crucible the earth has to offer, and he had done it in impressive fashion. The fight was a grueling slog on the ground as the two men vied for dominance and exchanged positional advantages, but it was ultimately the heart and grit of the man they call the Great that would overcome the Japanese warrior. Although Alexander had taken his debut fight in the UFC at lightweight, he now wanted to move down to featherweight, where he more than likely would perform the best. We wouldn't see him for 6 months, but the time was not wasted. Training away and perfecting his craft on the prestigious gym floors of New Zealand City Kickboxing under the guidance of legendary coach Eugene Behrman, Volk's UFC featherweight debut was booked. He would be taking on his second Japanese fighter in the organization, Mizuto Hirota, at UFC Fight Night 110 on the 11th of June 2017. This would be the start of a dominant 2-year run through the featherweight rankings.
Why couldn't you
I want to fight regularly. I want to fight, I'm ready to fight. Even with these black eyes, I'll go in there in 2 weeks and get another fight. So I want another couple of fights this year. So if you could give me another one, bring them on.
all this time? Why couldn't you go back for me?
Mizuto Hirota, Shane Young, Jeremy Kennedy, Darren Elkins, all victims to Alexander's conquest over the featherweights. Whether it was devastating elbows that were hammered into the cranium of Jeremy Kennedy, or the disfigurement of Elkins' facial features that left him unrecognizable, Volk had certainly proven a point with his gutsy performances. His work ethic was unquestionable. These sets of performances had not only placed him fittingly at 10th in the world at featherweight, but it also provided a platform for him to showcase his complete mixed martial arts game. But perhaps more importantly, we got to see the good guy that Alex really is. Whilst he wasn't generating massive buzz in the space, those who had the pleasure of joining him on one of his interviews or stumbling across his social media page got an early insight into what a charismatic and well-meaning man he truly was. A complete contrast to those who had built careers off of shit-talking and an alpha male attitude. Volk was a true gentleman and was not about to sell himself out to climb up the ranks. He was working his way up the hard way, and now he was at a crossroads. It was time for the UFC to really test his mettle, and that would come in the form of Chad Mendes. It was now 3 years removed from his third bid at UFC Gold, where he was dismantled by McGregor in 2015. Since then, Chad had had a rather interesting few years in the sport. 6 months after the pretty devastating performance against the enigmatic Irishman, Chad would quite literally be forced to do an Ian Gary Cuck maneuver and serve as the main event for the tough final for McGregor's season of The Ultimate Fighter, where he served as a coach alongside Chad's head coach Uriah Faber. The fight would ultimately continue Mendes' string of unfortunate events, when for the first time in his career, he would lose 2 fights in a row, being knocked out by Frankie Edgar in just 2 minutes. And in the turn of the new year, 2016, Chad would get the final nail in the coffin for his time spent in title contention. On July 20th, it was announced that Mendes had tested positive for growth hormone releasing hexapeptide. According to Mendes, he hadn't done his research properly, and that the skin medication that he used to treat his eczema had contained the banned substance. And you know what, it's not like the team had ever been constantly accused of cheating before, so it wasn't suspicious in any way, shape or form. And let's face it, Chad never looked like the type of guy that would be on steroids anyway. For his accidental intake of human growth hormones, he would be hit with a 2-year suspension from the sport. He took it in his stride though, growing a YouTube channel, hunting, and doing what all Team Alpha Male prospects do, looking in the mirror more than likely, or photo shoots. The seasons changed, the clock ticked, and all but in the blink of an eye to the universe. His suspension was spent. On the 7th of May 2018, it was announced that Mendes would return to take on number 12 ranked Miles Jury on the main card of a fight night taking place later in the year in July. Mendes wouldn't waste time, knocking out Jury in just half a round, emphatically placing himself back inside the top 10, the media organizations blessing him with a 7 next to his name in respect to what he had accomplished those 2 years ago. Chad had made it extremely clear with the performance that he had only improved in his time away. He was back, and he was hungry, and so just 6 months later, he would find himself opening up the main card of UFC 232. His story had now crossed tracks with Alexander. This fight was one of the most important in the division, with title contention essentially on the line. The question was, could Chad get his 4th shot at UFC gold, or could the surging UFC featherweight Alexander Volkanovski climb graciously to the foot of the throne with undefeated divisional perfection?
Chad Money Mendes made his return to the UFC octagon after serving a 2-year suspension, winning with an impressive first-round knockout. We spoke to him about his upcoming fight this Saturday in LA.
Sticking to that game plan, getting in there, whooping his butt, and getting my hand raised. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, he's only lost to the greats, so nothing taken away. But I don't think his passion's there like it used to be. In our styles, we're gonna cancel a lot of things out. So I think I'm gonna catch him because of that. If not, like I said, I just don't think his head's in the game like it used to be. I think I'm going to bring him into deep waters if it goes that long.
Your pace is so ferocious, and you can keep that up for 25 minutes where you're never fading.
Yep.
It's so giant, man. The difference between a guy who fades and a guy who doesn't fade, it's so big. Because so many guys, especially when you see guys that are coming up in the ranks, they're kind of contenders, they're doing really well. You'll see them do real well in a fight for the first 2 rounds, and then you'll see a substantial drop off in the 3rd round. And that seems to be the difference between the really elite guys. And I know a lot of it is energy management for sure, but a lot of it is just that work that you do in the gym to make sure that you can push that crazy pace.
In a hard-fought, highly skilled fight, both fighters brought it to one another, Mendes even rocking Alex, but it was the great heart and resolve that triumphed inside of the cage that night. Mendes would wilt under the ceaseless tide of Volk's pressure, eventually being knocked out over halfway through the 2nd round, leaving Volk to cement himself in the top 5 of the featherweights, a prestigious place to be, but it is also the waters where the sharks roam, as he was soon to find out. Alex had certainly proven that he was the rightful next contender to the title. The UFC had other plans though. Max Holloway would ultimately take on Dustin in a bid for a 2nd title, and that left 2 men in the division looking to be next in line. Alex was certainly one of them, and the other was Jose Aldo, an immovable object in the division who, despite losing to the Hawaiian champion twice, had not left the top echelon. He had re-cemented his position since his 2nd loss to Max by knocking out Renato Moicano and Jeremy Stevens in back-to-back performances of the night. And so, the UFC saw their opportunity, a title eliminator fight to take place just 1 month after Holloway's excursion to a heavier weight class. This was it. It was Alexander's moment.
Got a big one ahead, fighting at Rio, UFC 237. Looking forward to this one, it's a big one. Aldo, Jose Aldo, such a big fight, such a big name. It's a really important fight for me, and can't wait to go out there and do my thing.
I think every fight I do in there is very important, but this is, I guess you could call it a turning point. I'm really hungry and I want to win it because of that, because I have this entire path planned out in my head.
Aldo's still Aldo. He's still a very dangerous fighter, very explosive. He always was. He was even dangerous with Max. But, people, you're always going to, if he loses, had an off day. But, styles make fights. Max puts the pressure on. Max had good footwork, and I think he found a few holes in Aldo's game.
I think so. I think when you're a champion, everyone says you're the best in the world. But when you lose, they don't even look at the quality of your opponent, but the way that you lost. Not only did they underestimate me, they said it was the end for me, that my career was over, that I only serve as a ladder to others, but not me. I knew I was going to lose one day. Loss is a part of an athlete's career, not just in MMA. So I had to learn from it and deal with it.
I'm the only one who has a clear run at the title, really, you know, undefeated, taking out all the top guys, taking out #1 guy. The only guy that beat Aldo that's there is Max Holloway, the champ, you know what I mean? So, but letting me fight Aldo, I go out and win, sorry Frank, but I'm ahead. You know, my undefeated run's going to go, and it's just going to continue, because you're not going to get the same Alex Volkanovski you've seen last fight. I'm going to be a level up again. As you said, the King of Rio, the greatest featherweight of all time. It's just a huge win for me. But you know, it's just 30-27 over, you know, a legend like that is just unreal. And you know, we all know what I want next, and you know, I want that title.
Since joining the WEC back in 2008, Jose Aldo, the King of Rio, had only ever lost to two men, two champions, two greats. May 11th, 2019 would mark the day that the man often described as the greatest featherweight of all time would lose to a ranked contender rather than a man with a belt. That day also marked the last time that we would ever see Aldo fight at 145 pounds again. His time ruling and haunting that division had come to a dramatic end. His legacy, fuel for Alexander to continue his ascent, and in a way, I guess that truly marks how incredible Jose was. When people validate UFC reigns in the featherweight division, it lives and dies as to whether you had beaten the Brazilian or not. Max would never be considered a legend if he hadn't done what he had done to Jose. McGregor would have never rocketed into the stratosphere of popularity if he hadn't have done what he had done to any other man than Aldo. Their stories are built off of a man who struggled to escape the favelas and managed to climb valiantly to the top of the world. And not only did he stay there, he dominated, undefeated for all but a decade, and now the twilight of his career had fallen upon him. He would be unceremoniously kicked out of the division that he had called his own by Alexander Volkanovski. And if you want to know how that went and what he did after this, well then there's a video waiting for you. Volkanovski had done the seemingly impossible, asserted himself as the #1 ranked rightful contender, and now there was only one more man, one more legend standing in his way. Since 2014, Holloway had been on a tear in the featherweight division, culminating in the attainment of the interim title and his 10th straight win. From there, he would put in back-to-back performances, not only cementing himself as the undisputed featherweight champion, but also beating the consensus GOAT of the division, Jose Aldo, twice no less. After that, he would beat the brightest and best the 145ers had to offer, including Brian Ortega and Frankie Edgar. Max had also had the opportunity to try his hand at two-divisional greatness, in a failed bid to snatch the lightweight throne, falling short to Dustin Poirier. At featherweight though, his now 14-fight win streak was unrivaled, history-defining, and worthy in and of itself of featherweight GOAT status. Fans could simply not see an end to the path that Max was blazing. On September 22nd, it was announced that Max Holloway would defend his title for the 4th time against Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 245. In the final pay-per-view of 2019, the UFC were closing the year out with an absolute banger, 3 title fights in the main card, and the featherweight clash was certainly one to be remembered. Volkanovski was clearly the greatest challenger to arise from the bowels of the division in recent memory, and yet he was still a +160 underdog. Max, the man with a chin of granite, relentless cardio, and an elusive striking game, was simply unbeatable in the eyes of the fans. But Volk was here to do what he had always done, prove the doubters wrong. It's just this time, his crucible for doing so had never been bigger.
Fighting in our sport, fighting in mixed martial arts, being a fighter is the hardest thing ever in this whole world. Any other sport, baseball, basketball, soccer, you can have a shitty day, but guess what? Next week, 2 days later, 4 days later, you got another match to remind people why you are great. When you fight one time, one night, you can look terrible, you can look like You can just have an off night and you can't go back and step into the octagon for 4 to 6 months.
Max is a great champion, you know what I mean? So I'm expecting it to be a tough fight, but at the same time, man, I know I've said it, I'm the man for the job, and I really do believe that. And I get to show the world that in, 2 days?
That's just what it is, you know. I get nervous before every fight. Every fight I'm in the back going in my head and be like, what am I doing here? I told myself this was the last time. But now I'm here telling myself this is the last time, but then I start thinking like, what else can I be doing?
Really don't, you know, a lot of people will probably feel the pressure and things like that. I just don't feel it. I literally, I'm chill. I'm always chill. Just play what's in front of me, man. I think that's the trick.
It is what it is, you know. I thought I did enough, and we just see, you know. I don't want to sound like a sore loser, you know. Only three opinions mattered tonight, and it didn't go my way.
And the new. Tell me what it sounds like. Tell me what it feels like when you hear that sound.
Mate, it feels good, you know what I mean? Like when people start saying that, like it's starting to soak in a little bit, but it still hasn't. Man, I'm sure I would have told you before, like when I go into these fights, I'm always so level-headed and composed that I don't let it all get to me. So I'm just a regular bloke, and now I'm holding the world title, you know what I mean? It's just a blowout, it really is.
As the judges' scorecards were read, 48-47, Volkanovski's arm was shot upward toward the glittering lights, his face a mix of disbelief and conquest. Dana White wrapped the belt around his waist, glittering weaves of aureate. He had just beaten one of the featherweight division's most dominant champions, a man who had held the belt for over 2 years and had seemed untouchable. The UFC Championship belt itself was more than a trinket. It represented the pinnacle of mixed martial arts, a testament to any man's mastery of the sport worthy of claiming it. Crown forged in violence, earned through a gauntlet of blood-soaked battles, Volkanovski's path to the title was paved with sweat, tears and blood, left for all to see on the canvas. But it is the battles that no one sees that the victory is secured. Outside of the chain-linked fence, it is the brutal training camps, endless hours of sparring, grappling and conditioning, often pushing his body to the brink, months spent away from his young family, battling it out with men who were also chasing the same dream, sacrificing all the while. And now here, Volkanovski stood manifesting all that he had sought, the belt cinched around his waist. Whilst Volkanovski rose, Holloway sank into the bitter ashes of what might have been. For 2 years, the Hawaiian had stood proud atop the division, vanguarding the 145ers into a new era, leaving the echoes of Aldo and McGregor to fade as he himself went on to become one of the greats of the featherweights. And now here he was, the cinders of his 14-fight featherweight win streak lay at his feet. To be the best, you have to beat the best, and the best is blessed. That is at least what they say. He had won the belt with prestige, with honor, and led the sport as a true ambassador. It was now Volkanovski's turn, but Max's time headlining arenas, battling it out in title fights, securing big paychecks was not over. Far from it. He may not be champion now, but he had secured his position as one of the biggest stars in the sport 10 times over. And to that end, it was no surprise considering everything that Holloway had achieved that he would be offered an immediate rematch. And so in June of 2020, it was announced that the pair would find themselves across the octagon from one another once more at UFC 251. I'm not a massive fan of immediate rematches. I think that often the division needs an opportunity to shake out, but if anyone had deserved it, it was Holloway.
Max Holloway, round 2, July 11th. I've got something to prove. We ain't going 5 rounds.
Joined by the A side of the co-main event, Alex Volkanovski, the featherweight champ who defends his belt for the first time against Max Holloway.
I've got something to prove. You know, I really do have something to prove. I'm a little upset. I feel a little disrespected how things have been. But, you know, that just makes me, it's motivation. It really is. I'm motivated right now. I've got something to prove. I know I can outsmart him. I know I can outvolley him, you know, but, you know, a lot of people think he can't be finished. That's my goal now. I'm going to go set a real statement, take out Max Holloway, finish him inside the 5, and let everyone know, no doubt.
What is it about his demeanor where you say Alex is acting like a challenger?
I mean, did you guys interview him yet? Any of you guys interview him here? Like, how is he talking? Is he talking like a champion? The champ, what's he trying to prove? You know, if you believe you're the champ, who you trying to prove anything to? I'm not trying to prove anything to no one.
Ladies and
I know as a champ,
after 5 rounds,
you know,
the judges for decision. David Leslie scores the contest 48-27. Holloway. Mark Millett scores it 48-47. Volkanovski. And Clemens Turner scores it 48-47 for the winner by split decision.
Maybe 1 round for Volkanovski.
Yeah.
I feel bad for Max, man.
I had Max winning the fight. I thought he won the fight.
I think it was a robbery. I had a 3-2 for Holloway, for sure.
You can't leave it to these guys. We got some bad judging. And I don't know, has Max been in here yet? I'm sure he's devastated and, you know.
The fight was as close as it could possibly get, and Volkanovski was lucky to say the least that he walked away remaining the champion. I, for one, sitting there at 6 a.m. in the morning, was certain that Holloway had secured victory. The knockdown in the first, and his clear dominance in the first 2 rounds was setting up a clear path to victory, but the final 3 rounds were not so obvious, the 3rd round being the most uncertain. When it was all said and done, the majority of media members and fans called it a robbery, and not in the sense of being butthurt about their boy not pulling through, but simply, Holloway just seemed to be the better competitor on the night. The Weasel would break down the fight in his usual fashion, concentrating on the contentious round, and he in fact would score it in favour of Volkanovski. And to be fair to the reigning champion, in the rounds that mattered most, the championship rounds, he proved to be the better force. But there is only one opinion that matters, and that is the judges. Holloway was shut out of his bid to become a champion once more, and his place in the division became uncertain. For Volk though, he had proved that he belonged on the throne for the meantime. With no chance of a rubber match considering his 2 victories against Max, he now set his sights on the next contender to the belt, and one had re-emerged. After returning to the sport after some time away, Brian Ortega had secured victory against the Korean Zombie in an extremely impressive performance, but one in which he would be introduced to the nightmare fuel that is bold Ortega. Brian was a marketable guy, charismatic, did good numbers on social media, and was a fan favourite with his fighting style. The UFC saw the potential in him, and so they decided to give both competitors a rare leg up in this industry. The pair would serve as coaches on the reality TV show The Ultimate Fighter and its 29th season, and for those who had been blind to Volk's charismatic personality up until this point, were about to be forcibly exposed to it. The season was alright, I guess. Both men were just kind of nice guys, and so there was never really any tension, and the fighters on the actual show were just, well, not really entertaining or even really good, to be honest. I mean, here we go. Dustin Lamporos, Ryder Newman, Daniel Argueta. Do you know any of these men? No? Well, yeah, exactly. Normally the reality TV show produces some really decent names, but all we got was Brian Battle, which, not so bad if you ask me, but long gone were the days of the show producing literally 24 new blokes who would go on to become not only ranked, but sometimes even champions of the world. This season just stank, but it did serve as a good ad for Volk and Ortega's upcoming matchup, which was eventually scheduled for September at UFC 266 in 2021. The matchup was pretty nice, to be honest. It would be the first time that we would see Volk face a legitimate submission threat, but even still, Volk led as the clear favourite heading into the fight.
Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. I'm going to be going with Alexander Volkanovski here. I mean, he's just next level. I mean, watching what he did to Holloway in hindsight, now to what Holloway did to Calvin Kattar, it's hard not to pick Alexander Volkanovski here against Brian Ortega.
I'm going to be a real problem for him tomorrow because he looks uncomfortable right now.
I got Brian Ortega, but I got a little inside baseball here. I went and saw a training camp. There was only 3 guys in the room. It was Brian Ortega, Juan Archuleta. Win Juan was the sitting Bellator world champion, and the great TJ Dillashaw. They did a round robin. I can't share what I witnessed. I only share with you Ortega is dynamic. I believe he's going to lose some rounds, but I believe he's going to hit something, ultimately cut or put the champion down. I think he's going to do it in the 4th round. How do you like that for specifics, Ian?
After this is over, do you think you can sit down and have a pint and be a good acquaintance, or is this going to go beyond this fight?
To be honest, I would have to be pretty drunk to get along with him, I think. You know, I mean, I'll be honest again, you know, obviously I'm known to be respectful, but, you know, there's just things that annoy me, and that's that, so, yeah, probably not.
Volkanovski
good jab. He stopped.
That was a fight you couldn't call because Ortega almost won twice with 2 insane submissions.
Volk would piece up Ortega for 2 rounds straight, Bryan's face slowly becoming distorted and twisted with crimson as the overwhelming pressure of Volk's precision mounted. But halfway through the third, Ortega would land a crisp straight that set Alex on his ass, and in one of the smoothest transitions I've ever seen, Ortega snatched the reigning champ's neck in a mounted arm in guillotine, the panic immediate in Volk's desperation, kicking and fluttering with his legs, his head slowly turning pink as the oxygen was slowly squeezed out of his body. The commentators said it was over. I turned to those watching with me, mouth ajar. We knew it was over too. The crowd's scream also suggested this was it, and knew. Yet as darkness crept in from the suffocation, Alex found a way to survive. Somehow, some way. It was unexplainable, yet there was resolve buried deep in Alex's spirit, unearthed in a moment of desperation. And not only that, he reversed the position, and wouldn't you know it, the submission specialist once again put him in a tight, fight-ending triangle choke, locked up, ready to declare a new king of the division. And yet even in the face of yet another losing position, Volk triumphed. He had almost lost the fight twice in a matter of minutes, and not only did he end up ending the round in a flurry of punches from top position, he on all but one judge's scorecard won the round. Truly unbelievable to be so close to defeat and yet prevail. By that point the fight was done. Ortega had waned mentally. The last 2 championship rounds were a wash. Volk's victory, inevitable. Another ruby in the belt, another challenger destroyed, and Volk's ascent continued. And it is this fight that manifested in physical flesh the legend that was Bold Volk, embracing his receding hairline, his newfound mysticism, with it chiseling his name into MMA memes for the next decade. I feel like it was this fight that was the true turning point for fans, a real moment where it became clear that Volk was the sweetheart of the people. His YouTube channel had started to take off, and the cheers from the crowd were louder than ever. His next fight would prove pivotal, a chance to really hammer home his place atop the sport. Zombie, after losing his title to Jose way back in 2013, would return home, saddened by the loss, and it is here where he would have to commit 2 years of his life to his home country's national service, 2 years in the South Korean army. Because he was injured, he was granted a clerical role in the city, but because of the hours he had to work, he was unable to train to the standard that he had for the last decade, and so because of the injury in the national service, we wouldn't see Young for a rather frustrating 4 long years. 4 years in which he slowly slipped from the division's rankings, from the #1 contender to nothing at all. It was a sad time to say the least, but in late 2016, his return was booked. Zombie would make up for lost time, knocking out top 10 ranked Dennis Bermudez in the first round, and would carry on the momentum by edging out Yair Rodriguez in a back-and-forth 5-rounder. Well, there was until the very last second of a fight that Zombie was handily winning. Yair, out of pure desperation and creativity, would unleash one of the wildest knockouts the sport would ever see, back-elbowing the Zombie in a last-ditch effort and coming away the victor. Young would reflect on the loss a few days later, releasing a rather devastating Instagram post stating, "I do not have an excuse. I am so sorry to all of you who helped me. Thank you. Congratulations to those who hate me also. I have to be in hospital for the next few days. I have not been able to get on the plane yet. I'm ashamed. I'll go back and see you soon." It was tough to hear a fighter be so negative after such an incredible performance, and if anything, that fight will forever be etched into the history books. He was certainly nothing to be ashamed of. Despite being so close once more to a title, Young would have to go back to the drawing board, coming back the following year and getting 2 incredible performance of the night knockouts against top-ranked opponents in Frankie Edgar and Renato Moicano, once again sparking hopes of a title shot. But in a cyclical tale, Zombie would be shunted down the rankings in a battle of the mythical fighters, when he took on the accursed bold Ortega, returning to the sport after a 2-year hiatus. Ortega's return to the sport was masterful, leaving Zombie once again distant from the title. As we know, Ortega would go on to fight Volk, and after taking a year to recover, Zombie would come back with a dominant performance against number 8 ranked Dan Ige, a win that was secured in such a time when the featherweight division was in dire straits. Bold Volk, accursed bold Ortega, and no sparring Holloway, mythical fighters in their own rights, had culled all contenders from the division, meaning that coming off of just one win, but a legacy of violence, the Korean Zombie was granted his second shot at the title, and for Volkanovski, well, this was his third defense and another chance to claim a ruby.
But I guarantee you, I'm going to keep improving. Next time you see me, I guarantee you I'm going to be a level ahead. Again, I keep raising the bar. That's what I expect. I know I'm levels ahead of these guys, but you know, the best always want to improve themselves. They don't want to be better than the other guys. Just being better than the other guys isn't good enough. I want to be better than I was last month.
There hasn't been many times in a title fight where I've felt truly sorry for a fighter, but this has to be one of those occasions. Volkanovski dismantled the Korean Zombie over 4 brutal and bloody hard-to-watch rounds. Not only was the entire fan base calling for the fight to be mercifully ended, but so were the commentators. Whilst Volk was unable to knock the Zombie out, he did quite literally everything else, and that fact just stood as a testament as to why they call Young the Korean Zombie. He took everything, wobbling all the way. The ref eventually just stopped the fight. Zombie still standing, the ref probably wanting Zombie to remember his glory days when he grows old, not a life riddled with CTE rocking back and forth in a nursing home. Volk, well, he looked unstoppable, unbeatable, technically perfect, and his performance was perhaps one of the greatest that he had ever produced in his now 21-fight winning streak, a collection of wins not lightly earned, but rather against the best the world has to offer. Volk had done what those featherweight greats had done before him, clearing out the division, and the UFC would have to break one of their rules in order to provide the next carcass for Volk to roast on his cooking show, and that would come in the form of a trilogy. Despite one party losing twice already, on January 6th, it was announced that Max would be taking on Volk for his third shot at reclaiming his belt, and in the years that he had been separated from it, Max had done nothing but prove he deserved redemption. After losing to Volkanovski the second time, and seemingly shutting himself out from ever getting a title shot against the Australian ever again, Max decided to make it his personal mission to eradicate any top contenders that vied for his own title shot. It started with one of the greatest performances the sport will ever be graced with. Max stepped in against New York's finest and battered him from bell to bell, proclaiming along the way that he was the best boxer in the UFC, one of the most glorious moments the sport would ever bear witness to, one that will be remembered eternal as time ticks callously on. It's hard to really sum up how important these rare moments in the sport truly are. It's burned into the zeitgeist of the sport. When people ask, why do you watch this thing? Why do you love it? You point to Max staring at the commentary team, dodging punches, screaming that he's the best boxer in the UFC, and no one can talk that down. It's why people love Max ultimately. He creates these viral moments, not forcibly, but just by the very nature of his character. He followed up this performance with a second fight of the night in a row against number 3 ranked Yair Rodriguez in the main event of a fight night. With it, Max had once again cemented his position as number 1, and Volk had now no choice but to pick up the gauntlet that Max had laid at his feet, with one act of violence at a time.
Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 3, the trilogy, takes place this weekend in the co-main event of UFC 276. This one is to determine, in my opinion, the greatest featherweight of all time.
I've already beat him twice. I still feel like this is a really big fight for me and my legacy.
Do what I do best, figure out the way, find out But he improved that, shut it down and get the job done. Yeah. That's as simple.
But I do think it's going to take a pretty damn perfect performance for Max to wrest the belt away.
Let him have him. Let him have it. Let him have it. Oh, God. I can hear you to the noise.
All day. Hey, you can use them as much as you want. Saturday night, it ends for you.
Saturday night, we get to find out.
2-0, baby. Remember that. 2-0.
Let's go. I am the fucking heat, brother. I am the heat, brother. I am the heat, brother. I am the heat, brother.
Mitigating risk. I mean, we've never seen Holloway this busted up before.
No, and we watch Max Holloway fight right now. He's not fighting a bad fight. Alexander Volkanovski is just fighting at a different level.
And still,
round after round, the story unfolded with brutal clarity. Volkanovski's dominance was clear, suffocating any of Holloway's attempts to pull ahead in the fight. Max fought with heart, but Volk still triumphed. 50-45 across all judges' scorecards, a complete and utter shutout. This time there was no razor-thin margin. It was clear as day. Alex had made the adjustments required, and Max had no answers. It was a definitive end to the Holloway chapter, and all lingering questions, all controversies, all hanging asterisks had been eviscerated. Alex was now undisputed, standing alone at the top of the featherweights. For Max, the man who had once danced through the division with untouchable grace, now faced a harsher truth. His prime, the golden era, had faded, and the twilight of his career had descended around him, or so it seemed for the meanwhile. He stared into the void of what might have been, and only he could untangle amidst the gloomy cosmic web truths as to what future he wanted to manifest. Was this it? Was there a fire still burning deep? In time, all would be revealed, but for now, there was naught but the somber sting of defeat. For me, it was the night that the octagon bore witness to the delicate nature of greatness. It hangs on the razor's edge, threatening to slip out of reach from competitors who both seek eminence. Combat reveals all, and it is, as destined, the most honest judge of a man's resolve. You cannot hide from its revealing truth. You either were or were not. Volk emerged the better man for a third time, as it were, and it was without question now. He was the greatest featherweight the world had ever known. Greater than Holloway, greater than Conor, and now greater than Aldo. What lay ahead of him? Well, that was the question. I don't know what it is about the featherweights, but they over the years have produced men who simply separate themselves from the pack. Jose had dismantled almost everyone, Holloway had carried that on, and now here was Volk. The top 5 had consumed themselves, and any top contender that they managed to spit out was shunted back down with ease by Volk. It was hard to really paint a picture of what it was like to watch Volk at this time. He was technically on another level. He mixed the martial arts better than we had ever seen before, and he was a viable threat in almost any position that he was put in. Not only that, he had the one thing that cannot be taught, cannot be trained: heart, a resolve to achieve victory no matter the odds, no matter the danger. As far as the Australian was concerned, there was always a path to victory, always a chance. That willpower defined his reign, visible in every call to violence. This concoction of attributes produced, understandably, the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world, a place where Volk had sat pretty for some time. The man behind him in the pound-for-pound rankings was Islam Makhachev, Khabib's prodigy, and one of the most terrifying forces the lightweight division had ever seen. He was the current reigning 155-pound champion, and a man who on his path to claiming that belt had decimated all ranked opponents that stood in his way. Submission after submission, finish after finish. He was, by all accounts, well on his way to achieving lightweight greatness, and well, Alex wanted a piece of him. Outsized and counted out, Volkanovski clearly feared nothing. He called for his shot at a second belt. The fans drooled at the speculation of the matchup, and Dana White just about creamed himself at the prospect. It was the most tantalizing, most ridiculous, most talent-rich bout the UFC could offer at the time, and it didn't take long for the ink to dry on the contract. UFC 284, Australia, the crucible for greatness was staged, and it wouldn't be the UFC without milking an opportunity. conveniently places the co-main event was a rather tired and overused and frankly out of place opportunity. A featherweight interim title was put up for grabs for two top contenders. Josh Emmett and Yair Rodriguez was bizarrely provided a shot at second place gold. This interim title, in all the ones that had been graced in the featherweight division, had to be the most egregious. A title eliminator is all the bout was. But no, the UFC had to pull the wool over our eyes and put this pretend belt on the line. Volk was ready to go straight back down, win or loss, to defend his featherweight belt, but the UFC naturally saw things differently. Some interim championships are legit, and some others less so. This one was more of the latter, and so to be honest with you, I'm not going to dwell on it too much in this video essay. Yair had been a prospect from the moment that he had stepped foot in the octagon. I still remember all the way back in 2015 and 16 that the UFC was really trying to push him onto the fans, and for good reason really. He was flashy and he backed it up. After head-kicking Andre Fili back to California, he would be placed in a main event. This was, by the way, in his fourth ever UFC fight, rare indeed for any man. Winning that, he would go on to his second main event against UFC legend BJ Penn, a man washed up on the shores of a brutal legacy that had evidently eroded his body. Penn wasn't the same man that had ruled over two different divisions, and so it was no surprise that the young and hungry Mexican would go on to TKO the Hawaiian warrior. Yair, however, would go on to be fraud-checked in a title eliminator of sorts against Frankie Edgar. The UFC vet from New York would show that Yair had essentially zero wrestling, and he would need to go back and work on himself a little bit. He was a disappointment for the UFC, who wanted to see him succeed, and had spared no expense in promoting the Mexican fighter. Yair would come back and put on a pretty good win streak, only to fall short once again when it mattered most, this time against Max Holloway, who was also looking for his own return to the belt. After that, Rodriguez would pick up a controversial win against Ortega, who was coming off of his loss against Volk, and so it was here Yair was offered, on a one-fight win streak, a shot at UFC interim gold. Emmett, on the other hand, was far more active, a UFC vet in his own right, fighting since 2016. He had only lost 2 out of his 11 fights in the UFC. Josh had hands of stone, a constant knockout threat, and a man not afraid to put on a performance or a fight of the night. He had more than earned his shot at a title, currently riding a 5-fight win streak against the best the featherweight had to offer. UFC 284 was a pay-per-view destined to be remembered, the main and co-main event, crossroads for many fighters' legacies. All that was left to be done was to fight.
Alexander Volkanovski, if he wins this fight, is going to do it by KO. We're just gonna have to suck it up and deal with it. Alexander Volkanovski fans, we've got a couple more days. The walls are closing in.
There's a healthy amount of people picking Volkanovski to win this one. I don't see it, man. Makhachev's too big, too strong for him. He's just too good at grappling, man. They've been grappling since birth.
The ultimate fraud championship between Yair Rodriguez. These men may just be the least deserving contenders the UFC has ever gotten together and put a belt on the line for it, because the Green Goblin Josh Emmett is going to be fighting Little Lord Fauntleroy, the world's biggest spoiled brat, Yair Rodriguez. These guys are the epitome of handed to, not earned.
5 years since you fought here in Australia. This time, however, you are the man on the billboards. You're the man on the posters. Has this lived up to everything that you dreamt about for this fight week?
All that. Let him think he's invincible. Let him push that narrative. Say these guys are unstoppable, because that just makes my victory even bigger. So I'm gonna ride with that narrative and just show you what I can do and shock the world.
He's got real good takedown defense, and he can take guys down, but he's not the biggest guy even at 45.
I don't agree with the decision. I'm not going to call it a robbery. I just believe that Alexander Volkanovski won that fight based on damage. I'm not going to take it away from Islam Makhachev. He had a great performance, but let's be real. The real great performance of this fight was Alexander Volkanovski.
Alexander Volkanovski is the best fighter on the planet. And despite him not getting his hand raised, I do not have to bump him out of the top 5 based on how close of a fight he had with Islam and arguably winning the fight.
The contest for the lightweight throne was a masterpiece. Two men created art on the other side of the chain-linked fence. Technicality and heart splayed onto the canvas. Volkanovski pushed Makhachev to the brink, a place we had never seen the Dagestani fall to. Over 5 grueling rounds, the pair duked it out for not only a title, but for pound status. And shockingly, fans and analysts the world over scored the bout narrowly, like unbelievably narrowly. Many even believing Volk deserved the judge's decision. The official scorecards, 48-47, 48-47, and 49-46. It reflected the closeness of the bout, and the loss couldn't erase the sheer quality of fighter that Volkanovski displayed that night. His ability to hang with one of the most suffocating fighters in the sport on all levels, whilst moving up in weight, solidified his status as one of the greatest fighters the world had ever known. Volkanovski's legacy at the time was defined not only by an undefeated featherweight record in the UFC, but also his versatility as a technician of the sport. He had already conquered the featherweight division, dispatching legends and top contenders with ease. The Makhachev fight was a gamble indeed, a chance to become a 2-division champion and cement an untouchable status in the sport. Losing didn't erase or diminish anything that had come before. Instead, it showcased a rare kind of greatness, the courage to risk it all when the cards are stacked against you, a stylistic nightmare in Islam, and he strode into that fire and still emerged the other side in a way that left no doubt about his skill or position in the sport. And so when the rankings were released the Wednesday following, remarkably, he remained the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. That for me is what will perhaps define Volk's career when it is all said and done. He may not have won on the scorecards, but in our hearts he earned his flowers in due. Regardless, losing stings. That fact can never be washed away over any accolade. For an athlete like Volkanovski, who had tasted victory so consistently, that pain of defeat was visceral. You could see it in his post-fight demeanor, gracious, yet pained. Yet for the greatest of warriors out there, loss is only a fuel to a fire. Fighters like Volk don't shrink from defeat, they learn from it, and they certainly weaponize it. And so there was little point wallowing in defeat. Alex was still the champ after all, and now Yair played an active threat to Alex's disputed world title at 145 pounds. There was no other option. A flashy, rangy, and impressive striker now stood to take everything away from Volk. Alex promised activity, and he was about to be a man of his word. At the start of April, the unification bout was confirmed to take place at UFC 290 in July.
That was probably the most feared I've ever been in a fight, maybe. Like him and maybe Max. This was because I always say no one can beat me. No one can actually beat me. I don't believe anyone can beat me. But everyone has a puncher's chance. Everyone can catch you.
With his victory over Yair, Alexander Volkanovski stood alone, the undisputed king of the featherweight division. The crowd's roar in victory dissolved into a hollow hum in the back rooms of the stadium, though. It is in that silence that followed, a question clawed at him. What was next? On October 9th, a bout between Ilya and Alexander Volkanovski was confirmed to take place in January of 2024, but just as quickly as it was put together, it would fall apart. A week before the announcement, Volk would be called to step up on just 10 days' notice to face Islam Makhachev for the lightweight throne once more, a call to action that more than likely should have been avoided.
Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2, the rematch takes place this weekend in the main event of UFC 294, and I can't wait for this matchup. It's a great fight for the lightweight world championship. Everyone knows the deal by now. Alexander Volkanovski steps in on a week and a half's notice. As much as I do enjoy the idea of a Volkanovski-Makhachev rematch more than the idea of a Makhachev-Oliveira rematch, I don't like this fight being on a week and a half's notice for Volkanovski. And I do believe that Makhachev is going to get a TKO win. And I'm going to go with Makhachev getting this one done by TKO in the 3rd round.
Out of training camp, it would be Volkanovski, but that does figure to be a tough proposition. Oh!
Whilst everyone wanted short-notice Volk to be the new mythical fighter, it was sadly destined to fail. He would quickly find himself getting head-kicked back down to featherweight by the formidable mountain dweller, and to be frank, it wasn't a surprise. In a game of inches, at such high talent, champions are the last people who should be putting their legacy on the line at such incredibly short notice. Champions are defined by their teams, by their intricate and precise preparations, and whilst you can forever carve out a section of history by dethroning a champion a weight class above and on short notice, it does not mean that you have to, nor should do it. Nothing to lose is only applicable when a concussion or long-term injury isn't on the other side of it all. Volkanovski's openness after his defeat was the writing on the wall for a small group of fans.
I needed it. Again, obviously a lot of people will say it's for the money and all that, but it was much more than that. Like, you know what I mean? It is hard. Like, it really is hard for athletes. Sorry. I never thought I'd struggle with it, but I mean, like, for some reason, when I wasn't fighting or in camp, Let's talk about what's next. I talk to the UFC and say, keep me busy. I say that because, again, I'm in my prime. I need a fight. A lot of people go, he needs a break, I don't need a break.
Alexander's need and desire and desperation to be back in the cage as soon as possible was overzealous at best, and at worst, a miscalculated mistake. After a brutal knockout, there is no question that the head needs rest, but regardless, the UFC and Volk would only push back his fight with Topuria 1 month to February rather than January of 2024, giving him essentially 3 months to recover from the concussion. This was especially dangerous considering the man that he would be standing across from, brash and hungry foe with something to prove, and the yearning to take everything away from Volk.
Trust me, I worked so hard for this one. I put my soul in this training camp. I worked and I don't plan to give an inch in that fight.
Ilya had been on an undefeated tear through the featherweight division, with devastating striking and impressive groundwork. Many hailed him as the kryptonite for Volk's style. Fast, young and athletic, Volk was on the other side of his career at this point, mean to death as an old man. Despite Ilya having everything fans could dream of, from highlight knockouts and impressive performances, he still had his back against the wall going into the fight. Volk was the fan's sweetheart, and no opponent could derail that. The way that Ilya carried himself and talked all fight week long was met with resistance at every point by fans. People, for whatever reason, wanted to see Ilya lose. The long-reigning, charismatic, and consummate martial artist Volk had the entire sport behind him, and Ilya not only had to beat him, but turn the crowd to his favor. So the question was, could he do it?
You already know what's going to happen. You just came ready for the retirement. I'm going to take your head off. I'm going to show you levels. I'm going to walk the floor with you.
I'm going to show you I'm the guy that's been on top of this division for so long. He doesn't stand a chance.
I'm going to take a couple of pictures.
Yeah, take pictures now because you won't have it after. He took advantage of taking a photo with the belt and not until I teach you a lesson. Maybe one day you can be a great champion. I'm going to kick your ass first. You'll learn your lesson. Maybe you can bounce back after that. But till then, get your hands off my belt.
La estrategia que voy a traer en la pelea, él no va a ser capaz de resolverlo.
Whenever you have a champion as dominant as Alexander Volkanovski, what you hope for is a challenger that's so imposing and so destructive that it makes you wonder whether or not he's going to be able to withstand this storm. That is Ilya Topuria.
That's a nice combination.
And good movement as well. He's not standing right in front of him. He's moving off the center line, cutting angles.
He knew what was coming. He felt my power.
I feel so happy right now. They're gonna tell you you can do it. They're gonna knock you down and doubt you. But guess what? The only person you need to achieve anything in this life, it's yourself. Just trust yourself, work tirelessly, have faith, and everything is possible. Look at me. Look at me now. Look.
Ilia would knock out Alexander the Great within 2 rounds, as he had predicted. He called his shot, and he landed it. It was another somber moment for MMA fans. Suspicions realized. Volk had returned to the cutthroat game too quickly, not giving his chin a chance to heal and recover. The knockout would continue a curse that has plagued the UFC since records began, those in title fights, 35 years and older, almost destined to lose. Old Man Volk had rather ironically materialized his own joke into reality. The darker truth. The porcelain of Volk's best years had begun to crack, and now that bitter downward trend of back and forth wins and losses has more than likely begun. Although we are yet to find out, we feel it in our bones. Ilia, on the other hand, had predicted his eventual crowning moment. Not only had he changed his Instagram bio weeks before stepping into the cage, attempting to manifest this reality, he was also confirmed fight week that he had a film crew following him around, creating a documentary entitled Road to Becoming Champion. Beyond that, he had also placed the belt around his waist during media day, spitting in the face of superstition. As far as Ilia was concerned, the fight was a mere formality. He had already won many months ago, and for what most mistook as arrogance, a thing that had soured many fans for whatever reason, wasn't. It was just confidence, unbreakable belief in himself to achieve the ultimate goal of any martial artist. It was strange, I guess, to see 2 stories destined for greatness collide, the bitterness of this sport shining through. No matter what, only one man walks out the other side of the chain-linked fence the victor. Volk, unfortunately, the man treading his sullen path of defeat into the back rooms of the stadium. His future was uncertain, as his legacy retreated into the shadows of a new icon of the sport. Volk would sit back and lick his wounds, and his future in the division seemed unclear. There was a lot of doubt as to whether or not he would get his rematch with Ilia, a man who would quickly defend his title against former featherweight champion and now certified BMF Max Holloway. I must say, it would have been weird to see such a dominant champ go out there and fight a contender to earn his way back to the title, and so rightfully, Volk just kind of sat on the sidelines, seeing how things would shake up with the rest of the division, and soon, clarity was brought to the division once more, and it wasn't what any of us expected. On February 19th, 2025, a full year after Volk had lost his fight, Dana White would take to Instagram Live to begrudgingly announce amongst a slew of exciting matchups that Ilia had vacated his featherweight title in pursuit of becoming a double champion in a heavier division. According to the UFC president, Ilia wanted to leave the weight cuts in the past and felt that he had the ability to become the sport's next 2-divisional champion. It was at first expected to be against Islam, the current lightweight champion, but it was soon announced that even Islam had similar fantasies of greatness, vacating his strap and moving up to welterweight, leaving Ilia to fight Charles for the vacant belt. In turn, Volkanovski was awarded another chance at claiming the featherweight throne. A matchup with Diego Lopez was announced in the same live event. They would headline UFC 314. A couple of months down the line, Diego Lopez was quickly becoming a fan favorite. He had a brutal and slick style, riding an incredible win streak against the division's best. Many felt that old Volk was being set up by the UFC to once again pass his legacy onto another up-and-comer. This was Volk's last chance, to say the least. Everything was on the line.
Had the mullet at the back, and then at the front, it was just a whole different vibe. I started getting the, "'Cause tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make
Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. I'm picking Diego Lopez by 50-45. I think just Volk is too old, he's too slow, and Lopez is just going to win that belt, man. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm just joking around. Not so fast. Alexander Volkanovski is putting a stop to Diego Lopez's win streak, and he's going to TKO him in round 4 or round 3. He's going to show him layers. Lopez is not ready for the layers of Volkanovski.
It was good to have a bit of a war, go through a bit of adversity in there, and bounce back. Because I don't shy away from adversity. That fight had a really good in there. But again, credit to Lopez.
I had never been so nervous watching a fight in such a long time. It was more of the fact that I don't think I could have stomached watching the Australian get knocked out again. It would confirm to me at the least that there really is no way for these brave men to escape Father Time. And I guess, in a self-centered way, no way for me to escape Father Time either. Every single fighter that I grew up watching this sport with had started going on losing streaks, eroded down by this violent game. It was clear to me that even I had seen a decade fall by the wayside at this point. My 20s now almost slipped through my fingers, defined quite literally by this sport, and now here I am, watching the end of so many of these warriors' journeys. It's a point of reflection that for some is hard to confront, but well, Volk did the impossible, beating that curse, beating Diego, and reclaiming the title. With it, many fans breathed a sigh of relief. In one of the most feel-good moments the sport has seen in a very long time. To be honest, I think we as fight fans needed this victory almost as much as Volk did. His path to the peak of this sport had been unforgiving. Beating Max 3 times had stripped away Holloway's bid to call him the greatest featherweight, and then Volk going on to lose and reclaim the belt. I think that it might be time to say that that title of the greatest now firmly sat with that man from Australia. Against Brian Ortega, he had felt the void close in, the guillotine tightening, until his vision vignetted in a creeping dark blur, only to claw his way back to achieve victory, his heart for all to see. And I think that perhaps that iconic moment serves as some kind of microcosm for Volk's whole career. The man always finds a way to endure, his heart unquestioned. There are many things that can break an athlete, and we have all seen Volk at his lowest. But in some senses, I think that Volk stands for something that the Japanese call kintsugi, the cracks repaired with gold, and that gold is around his waist. Every single win and loss in a way has built his history-defining legacy, a tale of a man with generational spirit and grit. But I guess, in a way, each of these performances has taken something too, a piece of his body, lost on the training room floor and the canvas of the octagon. This sport isn't about longevity, it erodes, it destroys, and every man's time standing in the sun does come to an end. But at least for now, that reality is distant. Alex remains the conqueror, and I think each one of us can at least be happy with that.